about it. I'm kind of laid back about it, but um, anyway, let me introduce myself, okay? I'm called Isabelle Mawasagi here on this in my neck of the woods here. And my name means something about sunshine, okay? Holding the light or something like that, eh? Somebody's holding a light, and that's what we're doing here. We're holding light, we're holding energy, we're holding the balance of the world together while we do our work. Anyways, I come from this place called Serpent River, and that is a big job in itself. Because when we talk about that serpent and the medicine of the serpent, we're talking about change and transmutation. And that change is something that for me, myself, and the people that I live around, it's about changing the old messages that we got from the outside world. The outside world told us you're no good. The outside world says you'll never amount to anything. That's what the outside world tell us. You're ugly. So we have to change all that inside of us and to bring ourselves in a up in a good way. So the lots of changes have been going on, and some of the ladies haven't changed. They're still struggling. They're still struggling there. You see them downtown over there struggling. But the old ladies and like Grandma Roberta, Grandmother Connie, all of us, we found a way to make that change inside of ourselves. So that's what we do. Anyways, this blood that's flowing through our veins, that's kind of like really important, to us because inside that blood there is a lot of memories, a lot of old ways that are flowing. Um, I became involved with my one of my helpers. Her name is Cindy Gaudette, and she was working on some kind of a project. She's a professor at the university, but she wasn't always a professor. She was a younger girl at that time. She was writing about. She said she was writing about the indigenous beliefs. So we started talking about this blood, the blood memories, the memories that we carry in our blood, eh? And so she wrote a book about it, and because I was there, I was helping her with that book. I got my name on that book too. She put my name on that book. So, anyways, I just want to talk a little bit about this calling. I'm working with this calling, okay? Because I got the message. Every kind of spirits come along and tell me, tell me different things about what's going on. And of course, I do believe that the people that are on this call, the people in this circle, are also being called because you see what's happening in our world today. Our big changes are happening. And those old stories, the old stories that are based on fear, they're based on greed, they're based on hatred, and they're based on violence. Those things are going down. The changes are happening, and those things are fighting to stay alive, and they're snarling and they're moving and trying to stay alive. They're fighting for their lives. But here we are sitting down here. We're working on we're working on love. So it's easy to get caught up in what's happening out there, you know. I was just talking to Connie about that just yesterday or the day before. How easy it is to get caught up in all that hatred and start becoming involved in that hatred ourselves and start spewing out all that hatred instead of sitting down and enjoying the beauty of our space. Because when we put out that beauty, that's what we get back. We get back that beauty. So, you know, in my last since November, I almost died here. If it wasn't for my friend down there with the red shirt on, I could have been died. So, anyways, everybody, all the people that were praying, there was a big load of people just praying away, and they kept me anchored to this world, to this physical world. And then that's what that call was all about. I guess I'm not finished here, not done yet. I won't be done until it's done. So anyway, energetically, we are being called upon to lift our own vibration and to change our consciousness, to open that up so that we become more than what we are now. We become more understanding, we become more loving, we become more aware of everything that's going on. Another thing that we're being called to do is we're being called to let go. Let go of all things that don't don't do a darn thing for us. There are things that are have latched onto us that are just dragging us down. Some of those things we got to let go of, whether they be people, places, or things. We got to let them go. And that is a big thing, a big thing. The thing about this call, this call is very, very insistent. And this call is saying, listen to me, listen to me. I'm calling, I'm talking to you. Why don't you listen? But not everybody, not everybody's going to answer. Not everybody can answer. Now, what that call is all about, it's all about deepening our connection, deepening our connection to the Earth Mother. We all acknowledge that mother, that Earth as our first mother, our first teacher. We have to connect with her again and start to believe in her. Another another spirit that we got to believe in is the moon, grandmother moon. We have to deepen our connection with that grandmother moon because it's important to us right now to open up that consciousness. We have to believe in something, and the earth mother has provided for us since the beginning of time. Grandmother moon, she's provided for us since the beginning of time. And not only that, but we have things inside of us, like our intuition, all that understandings, all those sacred laws of woman. We need to connect with all that too. And we got to become the embodiment of the sacred laws of woman. And I could sit down here and tell you what those sacred laws are, but if you don't go out and get it your own self, it's not going to be meaningful to you. If you have to go out there and and every time you find a piece, your consciousness is going to spread open again. So this is your journey. And then there are wisdoms that have been passed down from generations, generations of people, of women. They have passed their knowledge on to us, and that's our ancestors. And it's also about exploring the powers that our mothers carried, our grandmothers carried. My mother was a medicine uh, medicine person. You know, my grandmother was a black ash basket maker, and my grandfather, my other grandmother was a gardener. Those are some things that we can be looking at because we're thinking here that there are times coming. I was talking to the grandmothers before this call started that there are bad times are coming and we have to prepare ourselves somehow. And connecting with all that knowledge that they had is part of our preparation of being getting ready. Now, you would not be sitting here if you did not feel that calling or you didn't feel that pull in you to do something different. So I'll tell you, our world is dying. The old ways are dying. And of course, you are remembering. And we're sitting down here in this circle. We're going to help each other to remember. And I'm telling you right now, I see this happening that these old ladies, the ones with the gray hairs, the older ladies, they're all getting ready and they're all starting to rise up. This is actually happening and you're part of this. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been called here on this to this place. So that's what's happening. Older women are going to be ready, getting ready to teach the younger woman. And we are. So that's what's happening right now. I see that happening. Now, I'm going to be talking a little bit about our ancestors and their blood. I call this paper that I'm doing, it's called She and Her Sacred Blood. Yesterday's ancestors were amazed. They were totally amazed that she could bleed without being hurt, maimed, or wounded. She who could bleed without injury. And it was once a month that she could bleed. She bled. And you know, she was the first calendar. She was the very, very first calendar. Oh, I forgot to tell you about the Ojibwe creation story. This is involved in everything that I'm doing right now because of my old ladiness, um, and this what's happening in our world. The old people, the Anishinaabe elders, said that the maker of all things created the whole universe in what is called the seven fires of Ojibwe creation. So they take us right to the beginning of time. And the Great Spirit, he's the one who dreamed about all this. And he dreamed it in fire. And the first fire was when everything was black. You just try to close your eyes and just imagine you couldn't see nothing. That great spirit couldn't see nothing. And then after a while, there was a little heartbeat, boom, boom, that was heard in the darkness. And then after that, the sound of thunder rumbled across that darkness. And then after a while again, a flash of lightning lit up that lit up that darkness. And in that brief flash, there stood that Sheminado, the Great Spirit, the creator of all things. That's who stood there. And then it went dark again. And then it kept flashing. And then after that, the second fire of that creation was the creation of the sacred circle. And this is why the Ojibwe love their circles. They have all kinds of circles out there. And then they dreamed about that. He dreamed about that great, the sun. He dreamed that sun into being because they considered that sun a sacred fire all the while. So the sun is in a circle too. Everything is in a circle. You look out there, sometimes the moon is in a circle. You look out there and you see the seasons. You see that harsh winter we just came through? Now we're going into the springtime. And then we'll go into the summertime. Then we'll go into the fall times like a big circle. We're just traveling around in the big circle. And this is important when we understand, how the Anishinaabe see ourselves and our lives as just being part of the circle. We are part of the circle, our community, ourselves, our actions, and how we behave ourselves. This was how that the Great Spirit was able to hear his thoughts come back to him while he was thinking. He caused a link into that body, into that mind, into the emotions, the spirit, the heart. It was also within the sacred circle. We see how that creator formed that sun, and that sun is pretty darn hot. Sometimes it's going to heat us all up here in the summertime now. That is a sacred fire. So I heard this Dave Crochane. I went out there one time, and Dave Crochane, he said to me, he said to us, we were all sitting down in a circle. He said, "Oh, this guy came over here. He said he wanted me to advise him, he said, on what to do. He's going to become a politician, or is he going to, be a firekeeper?" So Dave Crochane said, "Oh, I can't tell you what to do." He said, "I can't tell you what to do at all." He said, "You have to go take that tobacco and go sit at that sacred fire," he said, "until the answers come." So that guy took that fire, that took that tobacco in his left hand, and he went there and he sat down there at sunset. When the sun was coming up, he sat down there and he talked to that sacred fire, about what he should do. And, the answer came to him after 3 or 4 days. He became a politician. So that's how he lives his life. And Dave Crochane said, "Oh, I had nothing to do with that." He said he had to listen to that sacred fire. So now the third fire, that great spirit said to himself, there has to be twinness, doubleness, twinness. He said, and so anyways, he created a daytime and he created a nighttime. He created a good time and he created a bad time. So there's always, a balance there of the balances between, the good times and the bad times. There's um, a balance between the rich times and the poverty times. So this is the twinness that the Great Spirit created. So that's considered to be good by my people. And the fourth fire, thinking to himself that all this was good, he said being good was sacred. You got to take care of that body and, take care of, whatever's you're putting into your body. Take care of what you're putting into your up here in your mind and take care of, what you're putting into your emotions, how your emotions are coming out. And he said, and take care of your spirit. That's most important. So that's what he said, being a good and sacred person. Now, this is the time of the fifth fire, and he created little birds. You know, you hear those birds singing, you go sit out in your back deck. First thing in the morning, you grab your cup of coffee, you go sit out there, and what the heck do you hear? You hear little birds singing their songs, little bees buzzing around. Hear all of nature. And you can't stay mad when you're sitting outside on your deck because everything out there is happy. They're happy. And so he created those birds. And those birds were given a darn good job. There was one bird there, it's called Gnu. And I think he was the golden eagle. And that he told that eagle, he said, he said, Eagle, he said, Gnu. He said, what I want you to do, he says, is every morning at dawn, he said, you go and you fly out there, he said, and check out all places on earth, he said. And he said, you see what the people are doing. He said, and the Gnu said, yeah, he said, I could do that. Jamanado, he said, I could do that. And so that's what that Gnu does. That eagle flies out there every morning at dawn. He begins his flight from the east and he starts flying out over the Great Spirit's creation. And sometimes he sees people sitting out there making at the fire, with their tobacco, making prayers. That's what he sees. Sometimes he sees them sitting out there, being so happy with their cup of coffee. All this happiness is vibrating around them. That canoe, he's the one who can spiral up to the high heavens when you can't even see him anymore. He's up there someplace and he gets up to the Great Spirit and he's Great Spirit, Geminado. He said, I saw them people down there. They're still praying. He said, those people are still feeling grateful. He said, there's their gratefulness out there. He said, so that's how that Great Spirit knows, like how he communicates, how that Gnu communicates with Cheminado. Now I'm coming to a really, really important fire, and that's the sixth fire. And the time that I was hearing this Ojibwe creation story, it didn't dawn on me, nothing hit me. That was just a creation story, it was a nice story and everything. But as I got older, and I heard that creation story again, one day, whoever was presenting the Ojibwe creation story started talking about the sixth fire. He said then he thought he would make someone that he could always go to. And so he made Mother Earth. And she was beautiful. And he loved her with all his heart. And so the creation of the earth was the sixth fire. And he told her, he said, you will have the power and the responsibility to give birth, to create another of yourself. At the beginning of time, that woman, she was such a sacred and holy being. She was revered as first mother, mother of all, and the first teacher. So I took that and I went into that place where she became that woman. She started to bleed and people really respected her back in the day at the beginning of time. And the only time that she did not bleed was when she was big with a child or when she became pregnant because she was creating a new life because this is where human beings come from. And she was the only one who could make people. And the beginning times people thought that this was miraculous. It was awesome. Stataha. She did not bleed. And so they considered that blood to be sacred. So she was sacred and she was a powerful, powerful human being. That sacred blood followed the cycle, and that's why her cycle became the first calendars. Was the first calendar. And that calendar is recorded upon the back of that turtle. You'll see that that turtle has 13 little platelets, 13 little compartments on its back. And then right on the edge, it's got 28 tiny little platelets for those 28 days. So that when she was giving birth to another being, all of this, all these blood memories went into that child. Memories going back thousands of years were embedded into people's blood because of that first woman. That's what happened. And it's still true today. And whenever you get an inspiration, you get, an intuition, that is that is being downloaded by the ancestors. We carry this sacred ancestral knowledge in our bodies through the blood. And when we sit and meditate on something that's really causing us a big quandary, the answers will come. It's just when you enter into that quiet space, that knowledge that you need is going to become come up for you because this knowledge is there and it's pulsing through the heart and it's pulsing to every part of your body. There's nothing here that is new to you. You already know this. When we sit in those circles, we remind each other of the things that we have forgotten. That's what we are doing. A lot of times people tell me, Isabelle, those men won't let us come to those ceremonies. And we'll discuss that after because you probably heard all that too. So, anyways, um, that was the creation story. I use that creation story on all my work that I do because it's important to that you understand that you are sacred, sacred beings. As women, you are sacred. And somewhere along the line, that sacredness got taken out of you. And yeah, so I just gotta think about this. I just gotta look at my notes here a little bit. I'm all mixed up today. You'll just have to bear with me here. I want to talk about that grandmother. Okay, that grandmother is really important to us. And the Great Spirit, he looked at that first mother and he said, no, no, he said, I don't want her to suffer. I don't want her to be lonesome. So he created another woman. And this woman he called Golkamis or Nokomis. And there were 13 of them grandmothers. You see them once a month hanging up in that night sky. And every one of them has a name. They have a name, and that's up for you to research those names because every one of those names has a story that's attached to that name. And they're attached to that grandmother. And that grandmother, if you get those names and you research those names and look at those stories, you will find those stories have a lot to do, a lot to knowledge in them that is important for us today as we go along, as we go about our business of creating this new world we got to live in. The air in my house must be dry. Anyways, some of the ladies, I had lots of, I've been teaching and working with women for maybe 40 years now. When I was a young woman, I taught about young woman things. I worked with young women and we talked about young women, how to keep the young women going. Now that I'm an old lady, I talk about old lady things and how to keep those old lady going and what are the roles and responsibilities of old lady. So that old lady, some of them call her she who hangs in the night sky. That's that's what some of our people call her. And then the Great Spirit, he told her to straight to her face. He didn't talk about her behind her back, but he told told her straight to her face. He said, "Oh, late grandmother," he said, "you will have the duty and the responsibility to regulate life and to maintain the order in those communities." That's what he told her. And with this sacred law comes the power that you need to do your job. You will have the authority to fulfill your sacred duties and your responsibilities. But you know what happened to that, eh? I'm going to talk a little bit about the seventh fire, and then I'm going back to the sixth fire again. The seventh fire, he said, then he, Great Spirit said to Shemanado, said, I will make a man red from the soil, and I'm going to let him live on Mother Earth. So he created Anishinaabe, the original man, and the creation of the man was the seventh fire. Anishinaabe would travel the land and name all that the Creator had made. And he was to live in balance with those animals that the Creator formed on Mother Earth. And when that man was placed upon the earth, he was placed gently on the earth. And he was to walk gently upon the earth, breaking not even one blade of grass, not even one twig. He was to walk gently. So it is in these fires that we remember our deep and abiding love for and our connection to the land. And we will grow into what we will be based upon the Creator's gifts and the teachings. So now we look at the going back to the sixth fire when he created the grandmother. Now that's where I'm at right now, you know. So, anyways, thousands of years ago, the church over there decided that they were gonna. They went. First of all, those men went to this woman there, and they told her, well, we want your secret on how do you how do you create other people? We want to have that power. That's a creator. That's creator's creator. What's it doing? This creator. And so that woman, she couldn't give him that power. So he killed her. He laid her upon the altar over there and he killed her. And so began that killing of all those medicine people, the stargazers, everybody. They burned them up over there. They drowned them. And they were not finished over there. They left the killing fields over there in Europe and they came over here to Turtle Island. And then they started over here and they haven't stopped. Not once did they stop. It became okay to target an Indian woman with brown skin and to go beat her to death, kill her. So that's how we have to look at it. That's how we have to watch ourselves and how we have to look after each other. And now today, I want to just go into a little bit about how the blood works in our bodies. Okay. Now we know that um, that the water is sacred and that the water carries memory. Okay, we learned that from the way long time ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, women, and they knew that you know the water was sacred. They knew that we couldn't live without water. And that's why they're walking around on Turtle Island, protecting all the water, and they're laying down the blessings on all that water. If those ladies would not do that, I don't know if we'd still have as good water that we have. Now, our us people, as people, we're 98% water. And that grandmother moon, she tries to help us. Once a month, she becomes full, really, really full. And she sends down all this healing energy to us so that it affects our bodies, it affects all of us. And we can stand out there in that moonlight and we can talk to that grandmother moon and we can ask her, like, Miigwech, thank you for everything that you've given me. Thank you for keeping me alive. Thank you for my family. You can talk to her like that. And when you talk to her like that, she'll just send you more blessings. You'll be blessed very much. And then there are times, when the women gather get a little, what do you call it, a little jar, a sealer jar. They put water in that and they ask her, please bless this water and turn this water into medicine for me so that I can keep myself well and going all month. And, she sends down those beams of energy into that water so that we can use that water as medicine all month long. Take a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons a day. And that's how we use that, medicine, that how we turn that water into medicine. Now I had a little grandson. He didn't like living over with his mother. His mother and dad split up. So his mother took him out of the community, took him up there to not too far from here. And one day it was Easter time, and I went over to visit them, me and my husband. And I said, "Where's my little grandson? Where's my grandson? Where's my oldest grandson?" She said, "He's in the back bedroom over there." So I went over there to wish him happy Easter. I said, "Oh, what you doing here laying around in the dark?" I said. And he said, "Oh," he said, "I was fighting with my little brother." He said, "My mother sent me back here." So I said, "Do you spend a lot of time back here?" He said, "Oh yeah, Grandma." He said, "She puts me back here." You know how that little boy said, how that little boy said that, eh? So I said, "Oh, okay, well, just give me a kiss then." I said, and then I'll go out there and I'll see if she can let you out so that you can come out and visit. I went out there and I said, "Well, how come he's in the back bedroom over there?" I said. And she said, "Well, he's fights the brother." He says, "The brother's just small." He said, "I'm scared that he might really hurt him." He said. So I said, "Well, how about if me and Blaine take him home?" I said, "We'll take him home with us." So she went to the back bedroom over there and she told him, that little boy had his clothes packed in 20 minutes. He was ready. He had the suitcases by the door. 20 minutes. I brought that little angry boy home with me, my husband and I. And, every day, he'd get up and go to school, and I would put my hand on his chest and one of my other hands on his back. I said, "Let me talk to your heart, my boy. Let me talk to your heart." And he'd say, "Okay, Graham," you know. And I would tell him, "You're a really good boy. And not only are you a good boy, but you're so smart." And, when I talked his blood like that, when I talked to that 98% of his water that's in his body, he was a little bit less angry. He was a little less angry, that fellow. And, I kept him with me for about 3 or 4 years there. And every day I'd talk to his heart. And there were other things I had to do too, because, my home wasn't the only thing that was impinging upon him and his rights. It was the school too. There was some really nasty teachers out there. They were like screaming at those Indian kids. So, I had to take them for cedar baths every once in a while. And that's like giving them a kind of like a sponge bath with water. So, though all those things helped him. He's a kind of like he's a soldier now, eh? He's out there at the Alberta there at some camp out there, soldier camp. And once in a while he comes over here and he said, "You remember those cedar bats?" He said, "Do you remember talking to my heart?" Oh my God. It brings back such good memories of, what used to happen there with with my boy. And another thing about how that blood makes us remember. One time, I was going down to Nipissing First Nation. I was going to go visit some of those grandmothers down there. I have grandmother gatherings. And I said to some of the grandmothers down in Nipissing, I said, "Let's have a grandmother gathering." I said. They said, "Oh, come on down. Let's have a grandmother gathering." So I was going down to Nipissing, which is a couple hours from here. And I stopped over at Tim Hortons down in Sudbury. I decided to get myself a cup of coffee there. And there was this tiny little wee car that pulled in beside my car. It was kind of like one of those mini Austin cars, eh? And so they didn't have enough to come in there. So I backed my car out and turned it a little bit, and I made room for them. And then there was this man that stepped out of that car, and that man had red hair, and he had a medicine pouch hanging on his chest. And that man looked at me, and I looked at that man, and it was like something sparked there, something remembered, or something was happening. Anyways, I just smiled at him. He smiled at me. I got my coffee and I started up my horses and I left. I could not forget about that man, all the way to Nipissing First Nation. That man just kept invading my mind, kept invading. And so I got down there to the grandmother. I said, "Grandmothers," I said, "there's something happened over there in Sudbury." I said, "I saw this man." I said, "We looked at each other." I said, Something happened. There's a spark there that connected." And they said, "Oh, that happens sometimes." I said, "Yeah, but like I don't even like people with red hair." I said, "This guy had red hair, really red." And they just, you know, they said, "Oh, it'll come to you." And it took a little while, but I couldn't forget about that man for about 3 months. That man was playing in my mind back there. And then one time, one day, I went to bed and I had this dream. I dreamt that I was a Viking queen and I was his queen, you know. That's what happened to me. I said, I phoned those grandmother. I said, you know what? I said, why I couldn't get that man that I said I used to be that man's queen. I said, I was living in with some Vikings on this really rocky place. There's hardly nothing would grow there. I said, but I was the queen. I said, not that I was that man's queen. So, after all that, I started to remember all that through that dream that faded away, it went away. And, I'm able to look at that and I know, that I must have been born at a different time. Those memories travel from my great grandma to my grandma to my mom. It traveled to me until I could remember. They're there. They're embedded in that memory, that blood that flows through our bodies. And there are so many ways of knowing, people don't really know, eh? I had this other dream. I had to so I became involved with those 13 indigenous grandmothers from all around the world. And I do believe those women are sacred, sacred women. And they were sent here by the Jamanado, the maker of all things, to help us and to um, get us ready for whatever is coming, because they spread the words of peace. That's what they do. They talk about peace all the time. Anyways, I became involved with those old ladies. So one day I was down at the Omega Center down in New York. And this grandmother, Florida Maya, she said, I got invited to go down to this rest in Virginia, she said, to do some kind of an opening down there. She said, I'm so busy, she said, I can't do it. She said, maybe I'll just ask Isabelle to do it. I heard her. So I want to please those grandmothers so much, I wanted so bad um, to help them with their work. And so I said, oh, yes, of course I'll go. So I went back to Ottawa. I was working at the uh, Algonquin College down there. And so I went there to, and I got those papers from that conference that I was going to go to. And you know who was all on that conference? There was people like Lynn McTaggart. There was that Bruce Lipton. There was that all kinds of big scientists. And I was just a little old Indian going down there to do an opening. Boy, oh boy, I just looked for every which way I could to get out of going down to Reston, Virginia, because I didn't want to go there because I was uh intimidated. I was intimidated by these great big people, eh? And I couldn't get out of it. My girl, the one that was going out there with her, she was my helper, is called Cindy, the one who wrote the book about the blood. Well, she's getting ready to go to Reston, Virginia. She said, "Oh, I think I'll wear my Métis sash." She said, "And I'm gonna wear my dress with the roses on it." And I said, "Oh, I don't know what the heck I'm gonna wear. What am I gonna wear?" So, anyways, I was just trying to get out of it, and I was trying to find a way of, you know. Finally, one night I had this dream. I was sleeping away there, and then I dreamt that I was going to visit the Pope over at the Vatican. And when I had to go to visit the Pope at the Vatican, I started making myself this outfit, this dress, leather with big long fringes on it. I was in my dream, I was tapping out all these holes, in putting this dress together. And you know what? The next day went down to Vilkovich's down there and I bought myself and now almost a whole herd of deer skins. And then I started designing this dress the way I seen this in my dream. And then by the time I got down to Reston, Virginia, those damn fringes were so long like this here. Everything was moving as I was walking. I had a drum. Cindy had her eagle feather, her Métis dress on, her Métis sash on. I had that big buckskin, and it was white, and my whole hair was white too on top of that. So I must have looked like there's somebody, maybe an angel. I don't know. I'd like to think I look like an angel. Anyways, I went in there, did that opening. All I did was do a little prayer and a little drum song at the end of that there. And Cindy smudged everybody with her eagle fan and her smudge. And the thing about it is, I never that to me, that was just that simple little thing. But we were the talk of the whole conference. That's what happened to us down there. We were the talk of the buzz of the whole conference. You know, when I walked through those hallways with that buckskin, with that my little herd of deer on, people were just like, oh, they were just so amazed, you know. So we managed to pull that off, by the dream. And so that's how these things happen. You can listen to your dreams. And then there's this other thing called the intuition, your little gut, how that works. Sometimes, your gut says, well, it's about time you do something, and you're involved in something. And um, all these uh, all these ways that I practice, this birth laws, the cedar bath, all those things was because of people were showing me and telling me. Now, for my birth lodge, I went down to the six people of the Six Nations, and my cousin Cheryl was working down there. And she said to me, she said, Isabel, come on down here and do a drum workshop. And that was a long time ago. So, anyways, I took all these drum hoops, jumped on the bus, and went down to Six Nations to do this drum workshop. And so I got to sit with these grandmothers and grandfathers because where we were is a place called Where They Will Be Born. And it was a birth lodge, a birthing house. So I sat down there with those grandmas and grandpas listening to all these stories about the ceremonies, about how the children got their names, and all kinds of important information. And I got back on the bus after my drum workshop was done. And I said, oh, what the heck? How am I gonna, there's something here for me. Why did I go down there? So I stole all those, all those teachings down there, and I put them on a medicine wheel. And it was about springtime. And I took that birth lodge on the conference trail, and people really loved it. So that's how one way of listening to your gut instinct. And there are some times when I did not listen to that gut instinct and I lived to regret it. There were things that they told me to do. The spirit told me to do. It was downloaded to my blood and everything. And I did not listen. And, it was it was not something, just didn't work right for me for a little while until I started doing what I was told to do. So we got to learn a little bit sometimes about listening to that, the download that's coming. And so that's how some of these things work. So anyways, got a few little things I want to just talk about some of the things that we have to do now. Okay, we're building. Okay, now things are falling apart, but we have to have everything in place that we're returning to ourselves, through the ceremony, through the language, and through the sisterhood, through our circles like this. That's why you're being called to these circles. And those circles, they connect us to memory. Okay, because all of us have a memory, have a bit of the truth. And when that you hear that truth, it's like twigging your memories, and then you get the big picture, the full big picture. And so that's how we return to our ways. And then, picking up those moontime teachings, there's so much more involved in just what I said. There's a whole practice of moon, of honoring that moon, of being connected to that moon, how we keep on our way of how we connect our souls to that moon. And then that the language too is very, very important. That's why some of my grandmothers here, like Roberta, are so important to my work. When those language keepers um, look at me and see what I'm doing, they say, "Oh, I got a word for you." I said, "What is that word?" And they tell me, and that changes the whole thing for me, eh? And I'm going down to Mary Sue next not next week, but the week after. And we're having a women's gathering down there. First of all, we're doing the cleansing of the womb and the healing of the womb and the blessing of the womb. And then we're doing a grandmother's gathering of the grandmothers, and we're going to build grandmother's bundle down there. That's what we're doing. And Mary Sue will always have her grandmothers down there. So this is how things get done around here. And and I'd like to tell you that some of those teachings are old, really old, older than memory. And it's how we sit there with them. And I want to tell you too that you're not alone. Okay. Those Ojibwe women that boss me around up here, they said, Isabel, if you think you came in here by yourself, you better think again because there are 5 generations of grandmothers behind you who came into this room with you. So when I go someplace and I see an empty room, I know that room is not empty. There are people in that room, though you can't see them. They're there. And I'll tell you, your blood sings in a language older than English. Even if you never heard it, your spirit understands that. And anyways, I used to do drum workshops one time, so I had to learn a few tunes, and I want to sing an old lady song for you, and it's called Old Woman. That's only how I know it, and it's in English. And it goes like this. So I got my drums hanging on the wall. I forgot to bring them down, but I got a little thing here, and I will sing that song now. And that's the end of my presentation. And then we're going to open this up again, I guess, for questions or discussions, because that we have to discuss a lot of things as women. That there's things that are unexplainable, but maybe somebody in this circle has to answer. Old woman is watching, watching over you. In the darkness of the storm, she is watching. She is weaving, mending, gathering the colors. She is watching over you. So weave and mend, weave and mend. Gather the fragments safe and well, the sacred circle, sisters, weave and mend, weave and mend, oh women. Weave and mend. Woohoo! That's my little song. That's my presentation. So we're going to open this up now and let's talk. Let's talk.
Chimigwich, 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 Grandmother Isabel, thank you so much for your teachings and sharing your stories with us. We're going to go ahead and stop the recording now.